All right. Welcome back, everyone. Thanks for tuning in again. Um, give you a bit of background on the game this week. We covered the 1996 match uh, last time, first game. Kasparov lost that game, but he did go on to win the match. It was a six-game match. He won two of the games, I believe, and drew all the rest. So a nice win for Kasparov. And the Deep Blue team challenged him to a rematch in 1 year later. So much like my hair over the past week, the team are going to get a lot more streamlined and come back with um, hopefully a better Deep Blue. So we're going to dive straight in with the final game of the series. The score is 2.5, 2.5. One win to Gary, one win to Deep Blue, and the other three matches were draws. In the 1997 match, they're playing in New York, and it's Gary Kasparov to defend humanity against the evil computers. So once again, Deep Blue playing the white pieces and Gary playing the black pieces. So yeah, let's dive in. So e4 by Deep Blue and c6. Already like a pretty interesting move from Gary. This is the so-called Karo Khan. Kasparov usually goes for the Sicilian against computers, but he's maybe trying to mix it up, throw Deep Blue off. So d4. If your opponents play anything like this against you, it's always just good to grab control of the center. If they're not going to attack your e4 pawn, you may as well just push the other one and grab the center. d5, challenging the center. Knight c3, and we've got a trade. Knight d7, a normal developing move, and knight g5. And you might be thinking this is a pretty funky move by Deep Blue. Like, what's he doing here? But it's quite an interesting move. The idea is that like this square is very weak at the start of the game. It's only got one piece defending it, which is the king. It's a square you go after when you're going for Scholar's Mate, and the natural moves you might try to say, well, this is just a blank bullet. You've just wasted your time moving your knight here. F6 or h6 just to chase the knight away. Well, let's have a look. So if you play f6, knight comes to e6, and it's already a horrible place to have your opponent's knight. Comes with an attack on the queen, so the queen has to move. And now you just simply play knight e2, and okay, black gets this knight e5 idea in with a discovered attack on the knight. And he'd love for you to just take his knight so he can trade minor pieces, but you just say, no, I'll just defend the knight. If you capture it, I'll replace it. And now this knight is under threat, so it has to move back, and it's already a horrible position for black to be in. So not f6, h6 runs into a very similar idea. You play the same move. If you make the horrific blunder of saying, well, I'm just going to capture your knight, you get checkmated in two moves, unfortunately. So queen comes here, pawn blocks, and the queen takes, and that is checkmate. So that would have been a horrible way for Gary to lose. Thankfully, that is not what happened. Alternatively, the best thing to do is just to move the queen, and now you might be thinking, oh, you've just wasted your time putting your knight here, but you just trade it for the bishop. And if black captures with the king, he can't castle, and if he captures with the knight, he spent two moves getting his knight to f8. A pretty weird square. White, again, is very happy with this position. So Gary very wisely knows all this, so he doesn't go for f6 or h6, just a normal developing move. Knight g to f6, and bishop d3, just usual stuff. E6, knight 1 to f3, h6, and this is a pretty amazing move in the game. Knight takes on e6, and you might be thinking, no way he's sacrificing his knight this early, but he is. And in fact, this is actually the critical position in this game, and h6 is a blunder, because the problem is, Gary may have got his. You might be wondering, why did Gary Kasparov make a blunder? You might be wondering why it is a blunder. So I'll answer both of those questions. The correct line to go down for Gary would be to play bishop d6, and after the queen comes to e2, which is usually the continuation for white, now to play h6. And then if white goes for this knight captures on e6 idea now, the game progresses with f takes. Yes, you get this bishop check in, and the king can't castle. King comes to e7. And now after white castles, you can bring your knight back to f8 and just chase the bishop back. And you're very happy with this position. Okay, your king can't castle, but you've got a minor piece for a pawn. So nothing wrong there. Unfortunately, he played h6 straight away. And as you'll see in the game, this knight back idea to chase the bishop away that's on this square is no longer possible if you haven't developed your bishop first. So why did Gary play this move? Option number one, he could have simply just mixed up his move order. However, Gary had played this exact line against inferior computers in the past. So it's unlikely that he just messed up his move order. What is much more likely is that Gary is sort of just challenging the IBM team and saying, I don't think your computer can play this line. The problem is that, like, actually a lot of programmers banned their computer programs from playing this knight sacrifice. It is the best move in the position, and it's the only refutation to h6. But the computers were really bad at dealing with the resulting position. The point is that white has an amazing position after the knight sacrifice, and black is completely trapped in. But computers prefer to have material advantages than positional advantages, so they didn't deal with it very well. So Gary was hoping, well, A, Deep Blue will play the knight sacrifice and will misplay the resulting position, or B, Deep Blue will move back his knight and lose a tempo, and I'll be very happy. Unfortunately, neither of those things happened. So we have knight takes on e6, and again, if you're going to go down this line where you don't develop the bishop first, I'll show you, because again, the computer rates it as relatively even, but it's really hard to play this position as black. You have to play incredibly precisely, and it's just not a position that a human player wants to be in. So if you are going to go down this line, this is how you should progress. So immediately take with the pawn, and after you get checked, king comes forward. And can you see how before this bishop was out here and you could chase the white bishop away with knight back, which is why it's much better to play in the other order. But if you are going to go down this order, this is the way you want to go. The other bishop comes to f4, just getting a stranglehold on the black position. Queen check, c3, and now king d8. Remember this king on d8 for what happened in Gary's line. But if you look at this position, the computer actually rates it as relatively even. Yes, black's horrifically trapped in, but he is materially up. So if he's able to swap stuff, he should be alright. The queen's on a nice square. Unfortunately, Gary thought he saw an improvement to that line by playing queen e7. And the idea with queen e7 is that, okay, this knight can't move, so because it would reveal an attack on the king by the queen. So the knight's pinned. So what you've done is you've freed this d8 square up for the king. So in the line I just showed you, it took the king 2 moves to get to d8. He came here first, and then he came here. Now we've moved the queen. When we capture with the pawn and the bishop comes here, we'll get there in 1 move. So we've saved a move. Unfortunately, it's good for the king, but it's not so good for the queen. Like, this is not a nice square for the queen, and like the queen is much happier over here, much more active slicing across the board than here, where it's blocking the bishop in. It's not doing a lot to help you. However, Gary, saw this as an improvement, and it has been played before, so maybe he was just more familiar with it. So now Deep Blue castles and says, well, you're forced to take with the pawn, because if you go ahead and capture with the queen, which would be nice because now the bishop check cannot come. Unfortunately, rook e1 just wins the queen. You can't defend that. The queen cannot move because the king is behind it. That's why it's always good to castle. So instead, f takes. Now we get the bishop check, and Gary's king comes to d8. Again, I reiterate, it would be much better if the queen was here, because then this bishop would be free to come out. After bishop f4, you can see how the white bishops, just the 2 white bishops, have a complete stranglehold over the black position. The black bishops are atrocious. They're basically just like pawns. They're not really doing anything. And black's really going to struggle to untangle here. But if he does untangle, then he's up material. So hopefully, if he can do some trades, Gary might be able to win this for the humans. So this position actually had been reached before when Gary and Deep Blue played this game. Other players had reached this position. Gary probably reached this position himself, but as of b5, it's a completely new position, and they're both off their opening books, so they're both thinking for themselves now. It's a bit of a weird move, b5. There was probably better moves in this position, but Gary's trying to mix things up and really throw Deep Blue off. So a4, the black king's in the centre. When you have a positional advantage, you really need to just push it, because if you just allow black to untangle and you make really passive moves like pushing your pawns, or moving your king or something, black will end up winning because he'll just be able to untangle his pieces and he'll have a nice game. So so if this capture happens, then more lines will be open up against the king, so that's good stuff for Deep Blue. Oh, sorry about that. Bishop b7, just developing, and rook e1. It's always good to have your rook on the same line as the enemy queen. Knight d5, trying to untangle and attacking the bishop, so if you can move a piece with tempo, it's always good stuff. Bishop goes back, and in this position Gary played king c8. The problem with king c8 is Gary was probably worried about the bishop coming here. It's defended by the knight and it would pin the queen and the king. However, if that was played, then so a6 would have been a good continuation for black rather than king c8, because now if this pawn captures, you can capture here and it keeps the position a lot more closed around the king. So a6, and now if bishop h4 comes, you simply just move your knight back to block. Okay, you allow the knight to come in. Now you play king c8. Knight comes in with an attack on the rook. The rook gets out of the way, and after c3, again, white is still favoured, but black has held on to his material advantage, and actually, again, if he can somehow untangle this, he's sort of got a stronghold. He might be able to do some trades. He might be able to convert this to a win, even though white is favoured. Unfortunately, Gary he didn't go for that. So what did Gary play? After bishop g3, king c8. Yeah, so it's just too slow. Like, this is not a problem. In fact, Gary would welcome that move, or he should have welcomed that move. He shouldn't have been scared of it. But he played king c8 instead, just getting his king off that diagonal. Maybe he's worried that in the future this knight won't be able to block. So now Deep Blue says, okay, fantastic, I can open up lines against the king. I'll do that. And queen d3, just putting pressure on the pawn, defending the bishop. A nice centralising move. Another nice centralising move. The bishop defends all 3 pieces. Again, Gary would like to develop his other pieces, but it's really hard with the bishop trapped in. Can't move at all. His rook is basically trapped. This e6 pawn is a weakness. It's an isolated pawn, which means it can't be defended by other pawns, because you'll notice there are no black pawns on these 2 lines. So Deep Blue's plan is going to revolve around attacking this pawn now with bishop f5. A lovely move, because now if you capture the bishop, you expose the queen. And unfortunately, that's actually the best move. It's to give up your queen, and in exchange you'll win the bishop and the rook, because you can capture the bishop immediately, and after the queen captures, you can win the rook. If you don't go for this, then the whole position just collapses, and you're even more lost. So in short, you do have a material advantage now, but you have to give it back. So e takes, rook takes, bishop takes, and c4. And again, I like to go a bit mad with the arrows, but this is 19 moves in, and at this point, Gary Kasparov resigned the game and the match. Why is he lost? Well, it's just a lost position. I mean, that might sound a bit silly, but the queen's attacking these two pawns. The knight can come to h4 to attack this pawn. Your rooks are really struggling to get developed. Once the white rook comes to e1, there's going to be a load of pressure on your position. I'll run through an example, continuation with all the best engine moves, just to show you how it would reach an endgame. So b takes, queen takes, knight b4, just protecting the bishop. Rook e1, as I say, getting a rook onto that nice file. Rook e8, just opposing it. Knight h4, going after the pawn. You can't defend the pawn, so you may as well play f4 and draw the bishop to a square where it's not defended. Knight b6, attacking the queen. Queen comes here to put pressure on these pieces. The knight defends the bishop. The knight attacks the bishop, and you can't do anything to save the bishop now, so you can't move it because it's basically pinned because the queen and the rook eye this rook. A nice x-ray. And so black just goes after the loose bishop, so now we get knight captures, rook captures, knight captures, queen captures, and knight captures. You might be thinking, well, this actually looks winning for black. Rook and two minor pieces against the queen is good, and in fact it should be winning, but white has this queen f8 check, and now after the king moves you pick up the knight, and this will be an easily winning endgame for deep blue. You're two pawns up, and a queen is in fact better than a rook and a bishop. So that's an example of how it could have gone to an endgame, but probably the wisest thing Gary did in this match was just to resign in this position, because it's just horrible to play, humiliating even, to just play it out from here. Interestingly enough, immediately after this game concluded, Gary Kasparov was in a bit of a state, and he was very angry because he thought that the IBM team had cheated. He accused them of getting human masters to help the computer, because he'd never seen a computer successfully pull off this knight e6. Well, A, computers would very rarely even attempt the move, and B, if they did, they'd usually completely mess it up. So he accused them of cheating. They quite fairly refuted it, and actually, interestingly enough, they claimed that remember how last week I said the opening moves are essentially like predefined for the computer, so it just says, in this position I always play this move. That's how. So instead of just the computer calculates a move, the programmers say, well, if you're in this exact position, always play this move. And that very morning, perhaps with a bit of nice insight, the programmers said, well, if Gary plays the Caro-Kann against us and we get into this position, I want to program in the knight sacrifice for deep blue and then let it take it from there. So that's what they did. They programmed in the knight sacrifice, and that's why deep blue played it. But I don't know. In recent years, Gary's pretty much softened his position and said, yeah, fair enough to the IBM team. But he was very angry at the time, and in fact he demanded an instant rematch, and the IBM team not only declined the rematch but completely discontinued the deep blue program. They just stopped it and said, yep, we've beaten the best player in the world now, so we can stop this. And they got a huge... The only reason, I think some of the claims were people might have believed Gary that they were cheating, is that it really helped IBM. Everyone thought, wow, they're amazing, they can make a computer that can beat Gary Kasparov. But all the claims are pretty unfounded. And as I mentioned the other week, there were some people even saying that Bobby Fischer was feeding the computer moves. But yeah, anyway, I think I'm going to leave it there. It's a nice little 19 move game. I hope you enjoyed, and I think we'll get back to human games next week, because as fun as these computer games are, it can be a bit tedious watching computers play it out, especially the top engines these days, because you don't even have any way to analyze the games, because the thing you use to analyze the game is the thing that's playing the game. So all you can do is just watch the game and say, oh, well, that's a fun move. So yeah, back to human games. I might even do a stream in the middle of the week where I actually play chess. But yeah, until then, I hope you enjoy your weekends, and I shall see you all soon. So goodbye.